During the Cold War, an American soldier named James Joseph Dresnok was stationed on the Demilitarized Zone (DMZ) between North and South Korea. One day he made the extraordinary decision to simply walk across the line into North Korea. He was defecting, betraying his country, and choosing to start a new life in an enemy land he knew nothing about. For decades, the United States government tried to suppress this incident due to embarrassment, while North Korea similarly denied hosting American defectors. It wasn't until the 2000s that the truth began to emerge. Some speculate Dresnok was brainwashed, while others believe he genuinely embraced his new life. The question remained, why did Dresnok defect, and what exactly happened to him beyond those mysterious borders? The United States is often portrayed as the land of the American dream, a place of unparalleled opportunity. However, for some, it can feel more like a nightmare. James Joseph Dresnok was born on November 24, 1941, and grew up in Richmond, Virginia, in a family plagued by poverty and constant parental conflict over money. One day, his mother, unable to endure the relationship any longer, packed his and his brother's clothes, and they began driving, eventually sleeping in the car. The family essentially became homeless. The boys stopped attending school as their mother wandered from place to place, resorting to sex work to earn money. At night, she left James and his brother alone in the car while she drank in bars. Eventually, her family located them in Atlanta, Georgia, and she lost custody of her children. The North Korean government sought to use these men as proof that the United States and South Korea were terrible places to live, forcing people to flee. James began recounting the dark history of American slavery and widespread homelessness despite hard work, aligning with their propaganda. His willingness to participate led the North Koreans to ask him to speak over loudspeakers in English, proclaiming that more American soldiers would be treated like kings if they came to North Korea. However, life in North Korea wasn't always idyllic. Being the only white people in the entire country, especially amidst anti-American propaganda, was highly uncomfortable. The four men couldn't walk down the street without stares and whispers. They were forbidden from marrying North Korean women, quickly realizing a normal life would be impossible. Abshire, Parrish, and Jenkins agreed with Dresnok. It was time to plan their escape. In 1966, all four men resolved to leave. They visited the Soviet embassy in Pyongyang, requesting asylum to be transferred to the USSR. "We thought because they were white people too, they would accept," Dresnok recounted. "But the Russians didn't treat us good. The Soviets instead notified the Korean government, and the men were taken back into custody." According to Dresnok, the Koreans did not punish them for trying to leave. In fact, they seemingly felt guilty for making the men feel unwelcome and decided to intensify efforts to educate them in Korean language and culture. Compared to how he was treated for his mistakes in the U.S. Army, Dresnok felt grateful for their mercy and understanding. At this time, Kim Il-sung was actually making more economic progress in North Korea than in the South, where most people lived in extreme poverty as farmers. Pyongyang boasted skyscrapers, a sports stadium, and seemingly happy citizens, presenting a powerful image that communism might indeed be a superior choice to capitalism. Without external contact, these men had no way of knowing about the United States moon landing or other global advancements. The men were instructed that it was in everyone's best interest if they lived separately from average North Koreans. They were assigned minders who acted as personal servants, fulfilling daily needs, fetching items from supermarkets, and chauffeuring them wherever they wished to go. The four men lived as if on an extended vacation, reading novels, swimming in the river, smoking, drinking, gambling, and sharing stories about life in America. For James Dresnok, this was everything he had ever wanted. His definition of freedom, he felt like a king. However, Sergeant Charles Jenkins felt like a prisoner whose first escape attempt had failed, and the mission remained incomplete. As the highest-ranking officer, Jenkins began to act as their leader, dictating what the younger men should and shouldn't do. According to Dresnok, the other two men found comfort in this, accustomed to taking orders in the army and likely reassured by an older man continuing to plan their escape. But Dresnok disliked being bossed around. This led to a fistfight with Jenkins, where Dresnok punched him until he fell to the ground. After this incident, Abshire, Parrish, and Jenkins began to isolate themselves from James Dresnok. In 1972, the four men were fluent enough in Korean to be granted full North Korean citizenship. They were permitted to leave their compound, acquire their own apartments, food rations, and transportation. Kim Jong-il, then the great leader's son and not yet dictator, indulged in Hollywood movies and dreamed of becoming a film director, a privilege forbidden to average citizens. He needed actors to play villains, and the American men fit the bill. In 1978, all four starred in a 20-part drama titled Unsung Heroes. James Dresnok played a character named Arthur. Kim Jong-il explained to his people that to portray a villain effectively, an actor needed strong patriotism for their own country. After this, North Koreans stopped seeing these American defectors as enemies and began to view them as national heroes. Now, when Dresnok went out in public, people greeted him as Arthur and happily offered him free food, drinks, and gifts. In the 1980s, James Dresnok began teaching English classes at the University of Pyongyang. As much of the smuggled information about scientific and technological advancements from the outside world was in English, his help with translations was vital. One evening, at a restaurant, James Dresnok spotted a beautiful brunette woman named Doina Bombay, the first European woman he had seen in years. He struck up a conversation, asked her out, and they eventually married and had 2 children. It was later revealed that Doina Bombay may have been kidnapped by the North Korean government and placed in the restaurant to facilitate their meeting. However, James Dresnok maintained that she was there by choice. Even in 2014, her brother, Gabriel Bombay, demanded answers at the UN Human Rights Council, as her family was never allowed to communicate with her, leaving them uncertain if she had been kidnapped or chose to defect. She died of lung cancer before she could ever see her loved ones again. Larry Allen Abshir married a Thai woman named Anocha Panjoy, who had been working as a massage therapist in Bangkok. Her roommates claimed she left one day to get her hair done and never returned. Panjoy's friends and family never knew she had been kidnapped and was living in North Korea. Larry Abshir died in 1983 from a heart attack at 40 years old. During the 1990s, when Kim Jong-il became dictator, North Korea experienced a severe famine known as the Arduous March, estimated to have killed millions. However, the 4 American men, now celebrities and members of the elite class, never had to give up their food rations or suffer like the lower classes. James and Doina's 2 sons, Theodore and James, grew up and attended the Foreign Language College in Pyongyang. In a BBC interview, Dresnok stated that if he had stayed in the United States, he knew he could never have afforded to send his children to college, and he expressed no regrets for defecting. Not long after his first wife's death, James Dresnok returned to the same restaurant and met his 3rd wife. She was a mixed-race woman, born to a Togolese Republic diplomat and a Korean woman. As such, she was seen as undesirable for Korean men to marry, so James Dresnok married her, and they had a child together. Jerry Wayne Parrish married a woman named Sihanouk Shrita from Lebanon and eventually passed away. She was still alive to give her testimony during a BBC documentary, claiming she came to North Korea as a tourist, fell in love with Parrish, got pregnant, and decided to stay, denying she was kidnapped and expressing happiness living in North Korea. Parrish died in 1998 at 54 years old. James Dresnok and Charles Jenkins were the only 2 American defectors left from their original group, and even after all those years they remained at odds. Dresnok embraced life in North Korea, while Jenkins still felt very much like a prisoner. In 1980, 40-year-old Jenkins met 21-year-old Japanese woman Hitomi Soga, who bluntly told him she had been kidnapped and wanted to go home. Jenkins and Soga bonded over their homesickness, fell in love, and married. They lived in an apartment next door to Anocha Panjoy. The 2 kidnapped women became close friends, and all 3 secretly grieved for their home countries. Panjoy was eventually able to escape after marrying an East German diplomat, with the North Korean government's agreement to let her go. In 2002, the North Korean government granted mercy to Hitomi Soga and several other kidnapped Japanese women, allowing them to visit their families in Japan. They were supposed to return, but they never did. In 2004, the Japanese government helped reunite Charles Jenkins with Hitomi Soga. He and their 2 daughters were finally able to escape and move to Japan. Once free, Charles Jenkins wrote an autobiography titled "To Tell the Truth." In his book, Jenkins claimed that the North Korean government used James Dresnok as their muscle and that Dresnok beat him bloody on at least 30 different occasions. He also claimed they cut off the skin of all his U.S. Army tattoos without anesthetic. Even Dresnok admitted to the tattoo removal part of the story, revealing his scars during a documentary and stating that everyone volunteered to have them removed. Charles Jenkins also alleged that the government wanted all of them to father foreign children loyal to North Korea so they could become spies. James Dresnok continued to deny all of Jenkins' claims, asserting that Jenkins was exaggerating to sell his book. His 2 sons, Theodore and James, are now full-grown men who have followed in their father's footsteps, playing American villains in North Korean films. James Dresnok died in 2016 at 74 years old. President George W. Bush was asked to decide on Charles Jenkins's defection from the 1960s. After hearing the full story, Bush decided Jenkins would serve just 30 days in prison, and his rank was demoted to private. He was granted Japanese citizenship in 2008. Despite the manipulative circumstances of their meeting, Charles and Hitomi truly loved one another, remaining together for the rest of his life. Charles Jenkins died in 2017 at 77 years old. Ultimately, the full truth of what transpired behind closed doors may never be entirely known. Was James Dresnok genuinely brainwashed by the North Koreans? Or is this a situation where two individuals could have vastly different perspectives on an almost identical experience? James's father, unwilling to take responsibility, sent his sons to live with relatives. James went to live with an aunt who made it clear she resented the obligation, wanting him gone as soon as possible. Feeling unwelcome, he frequently ran away. His aunt eventually grew exasperated and took him back to his father's house. By then, his father had remarried and had initially concealed the existence of a second son from his new wife. The revelation of another mouth to feed sparked a heated argument. The following morning, James's father drove him to a retirement home a few towns away, claiming they were visiting an elderly relative. He instructed James to wait in the reception area, returned to his car, and never came back, leaving James an orphan with nowhere to go. Instead of seeking help from the staff or residents, James left the building, stole a $20 bill and then an unattended bicycle in an attempt to run away. He was caught by the police and labeled a juvenile delinquent, nearly sent to a detention center. However, he was instead allowed to live at the Overstreet Children's Home in Glen Allen, Virginia, run by a pastor nicknamed Big Papa. There, James finally felt a sense of belonging within a surrogate family, making friends with other orphans, including Sonny Jeter, who later recalled, "He had absolutely nothing. He had nothing to call his own, except the clothes that were on his back." For children in James Dresnok's situation, work opportunities were scarce. His disrupted schooling meant he struggled to catch up with his peers, and years later, he even claimed to be illiterate, though this may have been an exaggeration. At 17, he enlisted in the U.S. Army, seeing it as his best chance for a career and to acquire life skills. He believed the Army would offer freedom to travel and career options, but he found the reality to be the opposite. Strict rules dictated his postings, and drill sergeants constantly yelled at him. He realized his true desire was a normal life with a wife and children, the idyllic American dream family he never experienced as a child. During a short leave, 18-year-old James returned to Virginia and married Kathleen Ringwood, whom he had met at church. Their courtship was brief before the Army stationed him in West Germany for 2 years. The prolonged separation led to his wife's infidelity. He received a cold letter from her, stating she had found a new lover and wanted a divorce. Dresnok later expressed bitterness, recalling numerous opportunities to cheat in Germany, where many soldiers hired prostitutes, but he had remained celibate for over 2 years out of loyalty. He must have felt that the images of happy 1950s and 60-seconds American families were mere propaganda. If the American dream existed, he couldn't find it. He returned to Virginia just long enough to finalize his divorce. With nothing to keep him there, he immediately re-enlisted. "The time I left Richmond, I was fed up," he said. "I didn't want nothing. If I died or lived, I didn't care." More than a decade after the Korean War officially ended, skirmishes continued along the 2.5-mile-wide, 125-mile-long demilitarized zone (DMZ) between North and South Korea. In 1962, James Dresnok was stationed at the DMZ, shocked that even in peacetime he faced the risk of death defending the border. Depressed and having lost all hope for a future outside the Army, he spent his earnings on prostitutes in South Korean villages and drinking. At 20, his days became an endless cycle of taking orders, minimal effort, and letting loose whenever he had time off. One night, when his commanding officers denied him leave to see a girlfriend, he, fed up with constant obedience, forged his sergeant's signature on a pass and snuck out to the village. The next morning, August 15, 1962, Captain Thomas Bryan attempted to reprimand him for sneaking out. Dresnok defiantly snapped, "You can't touch me, I had a pass." Bryan, aware of the forgery, instructed Dresnok to report to his office at 3 p.m., intending to court-martial him. Feeling his future was non-existent, with no money or home, Dresnok looked towards North Korea. In the distance, North Korea's Peace Village broadcast music and urged South Koreans to defect, promising a beautiful communist country. From Dresnok's perspective, It appeared far more advanced than South Korea. That same day, during lunch break, Dresnok snuck out. In broad daylight, he began walking towards North Korea, aware of the landmines but so indifferent to his own life that he took the risk. When the Americans noticed him leaving, they shouted for him to return. He turned and fired into the air, startling everyone, and leading them to believe he had gone AWOL and was attacking them. He continued quickly towards North Korea, never looking back. "Yes, I was afraid," he later admitted, but at the time, life wasn't so precious. On the North Korean side, soldiers stationed at the DMZ saw a tall, powerful-looking white man approaching. They were ordered to battle stations, and a group surrounded him, guns and bayonets pointed. Many clearly wanted to kill the American monster they had been warned about, but the squad commander urged calm. They blindfolded him and took him to their base. James Dresnok was interrogated and calmly complied, answering all questions without resistance. As a private first class, he possessed no intelligence the North Koreans didn't already know. The next morning, still half asleep, James heard a voice speaking English. "Dresnok. Dresnok. I'm Abshir." Thinking it was a bad dream, he mumbled, "I don't know an Abshir." The man replied, "Larry Allen Abshir. You didn't see me in the newspapers?" It turned out James Dresnok was not the first American soldier to defect to North Korea. Larry Allen Abshir had a similar backstory to Dresnok, defecting after getting into trouble for smoking wild marijuana near the border. Another man, Jerry Wayne Parrish, defected a few months later in 1963. North Korea then began dropping flyers over the DMZ, offering financial incentives for Americans who brought weapons and secrets. This convinced Sergeant Charles Robert Jenkins, who defected in 1965, carrying an M14 rifle, and was celebrated publicly with an award.